And I think you'd have to say that the global response to the crisis deserves really a D minus. The obvious question when someone says to me, what's the global response, is to say, well, what global response? We've seen every nation having to take steps. Some have done it well, some have done it badly, some have done it very badly. Some have defied science, others have followed science. But in terms of a global response, we are seeing some scientific cooperation. But beyond that, the institutions of global government are dormant. The G7, the group of 7 leading industrialized democratic countries, now that Russia is no longer a member, have been unable to agree even a text of a written agreement. The G20, which you referenced, that was founded in the wake of the financial crisis in 2008-9, at the time I was in government, has had one virtual meeting, but otherwise is slumbering. And the UN Security Council is gridlocked because America and China can't agree on whether or not to refer to the World Health Organization as a specialist health agency. So really, it's a vacuum at the global level. And this is, I would say, the first crisis of the post-American world. Post-American, not in the sense of America disappearing, but post-American in the sense that Fareed Zakaria, the American author, described in 2008. A post-American world in the sense that the agenda-setting role of the world superpower has now been replaced by a much more fragmented balance of power. And that fragmentation is creating vacuum. Ian Bremmer calls it a leaderless world, a G0 world. And that, I think, has all sorts of consequences, not least for the most vulnerable, but also for many of the businesses who are phoning into this call. We're looking at a very different kind of global system, I think. Well, I think certainly the biggest competition is for bandwidth, for the attention span of governments. There's also some competition over material resources. But in truth, most of the global health agenda is not a competition for PPE equipment, for protective equipment. Most of it is actually a positive sum game, because obviously nations are not going to be able to return to anything like the old normal until they're able to be sure that the places that their citizens visit, either for tourism or for business, are safe. And so as a matter of self-interest, rationality would dictate more regional and global concern. So this does seem like quite a perverse outcome. The short-term competition for ventilators is not really any excuse for the lack of medium-term foresight that would demand a more global perspective. Well, all of us who are in leadership positions, we all say hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But obviously, we spend more time hoping for the best than we do preparing for the worst. I mean, there has been some jaw-dropping inertia and denialism. Equally, one's got to point out there's also been some pretty impressive responses. I mean, countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Germany, New Zealand, maybe easier for New Zealand because of its geography. Greece, interesting example, has responded very effectively, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'll be careful how I put it, but I don't think if you'd had a bet beforehand as to which countries are going to be at the top of the league, I'm not sure many people would have put Greece at the top of the league. But actually, the Greek government, the Greek people, have responded really, in European terms, very effectively. So I think that the WHO, the World Health Organization, obviously there have been missteps, but those missteps have often reflected not the strengths of the organization, the overweening strength as a kind of arrogant global institution, but actually weakness. It's reflected the fact that it's dependent on year funding. It's dependent on elections for its regional representatives. And I think that one of the most important ways out of this is not a great global debate about global governance, but actually a more focused debate on saying, okay, we all recognize that health is a global issue. These viruses don't respect borders. What would it mean to have a better resourced, more independent World Health Organization that's able to hold to account the national health systems and not be fearful of saying something in case it gets its funding cut? And I think you could even, I was interesting, even 2 weeks ago when President Trump announced his pause, a US paper on the reform of the WHO actually spoke to more independence, interestingly enough. So I think global health might be the way. If we're looking for a silver lining on this, it's that global health and the holes in the global health safety net get taken more seriously.